expanse of the Indian Ocean. The vocal elites of that time saw the effects of globalization more closely than ever before. The advent of faster communication technologies, made possible by the Industrial Revolution of England, while draining the Indian subcontinent of its riches, allowed for faster and more efficient communication, both physically and in terms of information transfer. This sudden uprising in Western traffic and their culture flooded the minds of the Indian people, especially the elites. Almost overnight, cultural bonds were created between groups separated by thousands of miles of distance. The Muslims of the subcontinent found brotherhood with the Muslims of modern-day Turkey. The Khilafat that stood there as an oppressive government was deemed the leader for the entirety of the faith, disregarding all the rest of the population that subscribed to the same faith but opposed the extremism and exploitative nature of the Khilafah. This was a result of cultural translation that was due to the displacement that took place. Those who came from the land and carried their culture with them were thought as messiahs by the people living in the subcontinent. The culture that was conveyed to them from these people and sources had to go through a substantial amount of change to accommodate itself for the minds of the people living here. This resulted in creating a kind of Creole-like culture that was neither the one it originated from nor the one which it aimed to replace. The Muslims of the subcontinent were indeed Muslims, but the culture they were born or raised in belonged to the Indian soil and not the one in Turkey. Thus a huge part of their identity was shared with the brothers and sisters living around them and not with the brothers and sisters abroad. Excluding their shared experience with their own kin to find a superior identity in some other culture, where these people are less than insignificant, is indeed a mistake. The same argument can be made in a different way about the people who were branding themselves as Bengalis and trying to establish that as the primary identity for the rest of Bengal. As I have mentioned before, the class differences and the different circumstances they have gone through to merely exist then were enough evidence for them to be classified into two groups of completely separate ideologies and identity. The Bengali in Calcutta and the Bengali in the southeastern region of Bengal were not the same people, though they spoke mostly the same tongue. The nature of classification and its political impact depends on the person performing the said classification. It is unwise to think that a certain classification is part of the inherent nature of an object, a person or a group of people. A person who is classified as a male or female by the paleontologist might be a transgender or cisgender person for the anthropologist. All classifications serve a purpose, and when those purposes change, so do the classifications. The statement that Shakespeare never said can go like this: the nature of classification lies in the eyes of the classifier. The same is true for the Muslims or the Bengalis or the Hindus of the region. These religions and ethnicities are not universally the same for everyone. There are sects and groups that vastly differ from other sects and groups within those identities. In the microscopic life of a person, being a Muslim or a Hindu matters far less than being a businessman, a salaried official, a day laborer, or even a husband or a wife. All of those are valid identities, and all of them carry weight in their respective fields of interest. Those who classify themselves as Muslims and others as non-Muslims, disregarding all other identities, did so for a purpose, and that purpose was trying to discover a self while cutting it off from the other. The same is true for the Hindus and the Bengalis. Any group of people trying to find a superimposing identity by importing it from abroad or manufacturing it by themselves to spread over all other identities like a heavy carpet is not doing anyone any service whatsoever. This carpet bombing of identities not only muddies the water of history, but also removes the space for the minor, still important stories to be preserved and creates a false premise that the conflict between the Hindus and the Muslims were universal in nature. The people living further down the class difference scale had little to no interest in fighting for a manufactured or imported identity, regardless of their religious and ethnical positions. This is how phantom identities were born, and these phantom identities were mistaken as the prevailing identities for the groups in question. Taking such a phantom identity and starting to believe that it is as true as flesh is what cultural hallucination is. It is not an illusion because you always know that behind an illusion there is a mechanism that is unknown to you. The miracle in that illusion is always present for the people. Like the magician's illusion, it is easy to understand that there is a mechanism behind such an illusion that you are not aware of. Unfortunately for hallucination, it is extremely difficult to make someone who is hallucinating realize that what he or she is seeing is not part of reality, rather a figment of his or her imagination. The same is true for cultural hallucinations. One who is suffering from such an infliction cannot be easily persuaded out of it. This brings us to the aftermath of the first version. The differences